all right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and happy new month to you all, wherever you are connected from. I am so excited to be on this show today. My name remains Emmanuel Adegbola. Good to see you all. Now you are welcome to Kina Ed Show. I mean, this is a show that everybody is talking about. I mean, it's turning banana online. This is what your friend, your colleagues need. And most especially today's topic, you don't want to miss it. In fact, I personally just sent it to our church group, and I hope you all connect because there are some things that prayer will handle, there are some things that counseling will handle, and there are some things that topics like this is what you just need. I mean, we are talking about food, fertility, reproductive system, how all of this tie together. I mean, personally, I'm so much ready to learn. I'm not a woman, but I'm a man, and I believe I'm still in the process also. So today, I have my pen, I have my notebook. Anyway, don't let me take all the time, but I'm just so excited for today's topic, for our guest, for my co-host, and of course for the elegant host herself. So let's get started, and let me bring in my co-host to introduce himself in the presence of Mr. Alex. Oh, sorry, Senator Alex. That's it. Right.
Well, Lord, thanks for the promotion, but I wish I'll get there. Alex is my name. I'm a co-host, as he has said, and we are set for the program. You're welcome.
Awesome. And let me bring in our panelists, our guests for today. I mean, each time I see this couple, they complement each other. I mean, it's not by accident that God actually partnered them together for a time like this. Join me to welcome Kat and Matthew. Come on, go ahead and just say hello to our viewers and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Catherine.
Hello, and I'm Matt.
We're grateful to be here. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Wow. So, I mean, just look at that smile alone. You know that today is going to be loaded. Okay, I'm going to be bringing in our host. She's going to introduce today's topic, what we should expect, what you should expect, and what should be your role. Join me to welcome the host of Kina Health Show, Dr. Kina Wineko herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Kina Menokoro. I am a family nurse practitioner. I'm also a mental health nurse practitioner. Welcome to Kina's Health Show. Today, we are going to be focusing on an issue that affects many families around the world, reproductive health. Very often, we rely mostly on medications for most of our medical issues and our health challenges. But today, we have Catherine and Matt, and they're going to show us a way that just eating the right amount of food and the quantity and how you prepare it can lead to improved fertility outcomes in both men and women. So I want you to watch on and listen carefully and take notes if you may. Welcome to the show.
Awesome. And without any further ado, we're going to dive into it because this is a topic that I know that even the 1 hour is not going to be enough to discuss what we want to discuss. So we better just get into it. So over to you, Mr. Alex, as you get started.
Yeah, like Kina said, it's a very interesting topic. We've been going to see how food can change fertility outcome. So, Catherine, please, can you explain to us how the relationship between food and fertility?
Well, food has a dramatic effect on our fertility, on both women's health and men's. And depending on our food choices and what we eat, it can really it can damage our reproductive organs and prevent them from functioning fully. But also, there are good beneficial foods that can help to rebuild our fertility and strengthen those reproductive organs and help people overcome reproductive disease and become pregnant and go on to have children. I'd like to share my story, if I could, Alex.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Great. So I was raised eating a diet that was very rich in fat and dairy, very low in vegetables and fiber and things. And I had eaten this way pretty much my whole life. And at 27 years old, I found myself overweight quite a bit, probably about 40 pounds overweight. And that's going to matter when we talk later about hormones. And I had stage 4 endometriosis and uterine cysts and cysts on my ovaries, and my reproductive system had kind of shut down. And I remember going to the doctor, being very scared, and told that I was completely infertile. I would never have children, and that I needed a full hysterectomy at 27 years old. And because I was too high risk for endometrial cancer and uterine cancer. And I remember pausing for a minute and asking the doctor, does this have anything to do with my food or what I'm eating? And unfortunately, he said, no, absolutely not. We have no control over this, but we also have no idea what causes it or how to cure it. And I think that was a transformative moment in my life, because my gut told me different. Like, I wonder if nutrition matters. And so it started me on this journey to work with a nutritionist and start learning about food and exploring that more. And through changing my diet and how I prepare foods and what I ate and drank too, because that matters, we were able to completely reverse all of my reproductive disease in about 6 months. So it was fantastic, but it was eye-opening. And throughout that process, I got healthy. He's going to put them outside. I'm sorry. I got healthy, and we got rid of the cysts, and I lost 55 pounds through that process. Some other great things health-wise took place that weren't related to reproductive health. But then I went on to have children. And so I've had 3 kids since then, 3 boys, and they're 4, 8, and 10. And since making these major dietary changes, none of my reproductive disease has returned at all. So it's really been remarkable and eye-opening. And I've worked with hundreds of patients since then with infertility and reproductive disease that have been able to overcome that through nutrition. So I'm really excited that we're able to share our story together and all of this amazing science that's out there that people don't know about. So thank you for having us on.
Wow. That is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm.
That is amazing. Can you list some of those various foods that helped you through your journey,
Mm-hmm.
so
Sure.
that our viewers, would benefit from that information?
Yeah, I'll start with women's reproductive health, and then Matt can add some things for the men as far as sperm production and things like that are important as well. So there are a couple of key factors with our reproductive health as women, and one is fiber. Most women have too much estrogen in our bodies, and that's either coming from excess body fat. When we have excess body fat, that fat actually starts to produce estrogens. And so we have this excess of estrogen circulating in our blood before menopause. And most women have this. And what that means is a lot of things. So one way that we get these estrogens is excess body fat. Another is by consuming estrogens and hormones. Chicken is our second highest source of estrogen in the body, because chickens, a lot of people prefer chicken breast. And in order to enlarge the breasts of a chicken abnormally, that chicken has to be given estrogen, right? Because that's what produces breast tissue. And so when we consume chicken, we are consuming excess hormones from the chicken. And so that's one thing that can cause this excess of estrogen. Another one, the number one contributor to this excess of estrogen is dairy products, dairy intake. And if you think about it, where does dairy come from? Well, it comes from a pregnant cow, or a breastfeed, like a nursing cow. And so this is same for a woman. In order for me to have a baby, I have to have estrogen, and I have to have large amounts of estrogen to support that baby. And then when I'm nursing the baby, large amounts of estrogen to produce the milk. And so same thing happens with a cow. Huge amounts of insulin-like growth factor are coming in the cow's milk, as well as estrogen. And so as a woman, our body takes this. We have all this estrogen, and we don't know where to store it. The other half of the coin is fiber. Fiber is what helps men and women remove excess hormones. And so since fiber is only found in plants, if we're not getting enough fiber in our diet, then these hormones are just left to recirculate in the body. And what happens for women, we store these excess hormones in our reproductive system because our body feels like that is our least important system, right? I want my heart and brain working. I don't know about you. So we end up with these excesses. And so that's where we see cysts and fibroids, uterine cysts, ovarian problems, and then endometriosis, which is just the lining of the uterus growing outside of the uterus. I mean, to put it in simple terms, it's got too much. It can't store it all in there. And then it starts to kind of take over the abdomen. And so in short, we are eating foods and having excess body weight, and this is all creating excess estrogen. And then we're not getting enough fiber to remove that. And exercise also is a big factor in helping to regulate our hormones as well. And we're just not exercising as much as we should be. I do want to say one thing specifically on our ovaries, because that is so important to fertility, right? And egg production and things like that. What's specifically damaging to ovaries is called galactose. Now, this is the sugar in dairy. It's the milk sugar that's in dairy, and it's actually toxic to our ovaries. And so when we look at milk consumption, just having 1 glass a day can dramatically increase a woman's risk of ovarian cancer. So even though we're not talking about cancer today, there are a lot of things that happen before a woman has ovarian cancer, right? We have ovarian problems and ovarian cysts and fibroids and things like that, overgrowth, poor egg production, poor egg release and things. And this seems to be the single most damaging thing to our reproductive system is dairy and that sugar from dairy specifically. It's called galactose. So we can deep dive into that and other foods that affect the ovaries in a little bit if you'd like. But I think it would be really valuable for Matt to talk a little bit about men, because there's a dairy connection there too.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really found interesting in terms of like how impactful dairy is on our reproductive system. And so there was actually a study done by the University of Rochester, excuse me, and it found that men, just to actually increase their cheese intake on average of 1 to 2.5 servings per day, they actually saw a lower sperm morphology, which just basically means shape. And then, of course, they saw a decrease in the motility, which is the movement. So we want the sperm to get to the egg. So they saw a decrease in movement. And then 28% lower sperm concentration. So when you think about that as a man, if you were going to get tested and they're saying your concentration is low, it's a possibility that your increase of dairy, such as cheese, milks, and even fatty dairy products like ice cream. And I knew that I had a big ice cream problem.
You did.
I used to eat
He loves ice cream.
I used to eat 2 Klondike bars a day, and it was like every day. And so she's like, I wonder how your sperm count is. I'm like, I don't know. So just ice cream, increasing that. So those are just little things because of that. But an average of 1 to 2 servings per day actually had dramatic difference in just how much it affected your shape, movement, and the concentration of your sperm count. And then, of course, we're talking about other things in terms of meats and stuff like that.
There was another landmark study.
There's a study done that was in Spain that just increased in dairy products and meat product, like such as processed meats, sausages, salamis, those types of things, or other processed meats, really, and having a low intake of fruits and vegetables. So you're going to hear a common theme: lower intakes of fruits and vegetables actually increased your infertility. So because you're eating more dairy and processed meats, not as much fruits and vegetables, you have a higher risk of infertility. So fruits and vegetables provide like antioxidants that protect the sperm cells. So it's really important to make sure you increase your antioxidant intake, and that's only going to be found in, of course, your fruits and vegetables. In addition, the study also found that supplements also help sperm as well. So it's things like omega-3s. However, we prefer to get omega-3s from the natural sources, which are from your food sources. But you want to increase that to about almost 2 grams per day.
That would be, let me pause there.
Sure.
So omega-3s you can get from dark leafy greens, seeds like flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds,
walnuts,
and then walnuts also, avocados, things like that.
Seaweed, like dried seaweed and stuff like that.
Or you can get it from a fish oil supplement, but the fish got the omega-3s from the dark leafy greens that they were eating.
From the kale and seaweed.
So that's where you get those. The other two would have to be taken in a supplement
So like
form.
carnitine, you want about 3 grams per day, and CoQ10, which is great for heart health, but also it's going to help with your sperm count and fertility as well. About 300 to 600 milligrams a day has been shown to be very impactful on improving fertility.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna come in because it's like my head is full already. So,
I know.
and I'm just trying to process what has been. I mean, I'm getting some text messages here. By the way, I have another person now that is planning to invite you guys on the show. So get ready. We'll discuss that later. But my head is full right now. So what you are trying to say now is that just by merely changing our diet, it can help fertility, it can help reproductive health.
Dramatically.
So I can't just eat whatever I like, and I feel after all God has blessed me to produce kids. I can't just go ahead and do that.
I
Is that
wish
what you're
it
saying?
I wish it worked that way. Yeah. Can I
Matt
share
tried that way. That doesn't work, Emmanuel.
If I could share a story with all the guests on here.
Please do. Please share. Please share.
You know, I heard Catherine's story whenever I met her, and I was just kind of blown away. I was going to nursing school, so I knew about health, but I wasn't working in health. I wasn't actually doing it. I was 85 pounds heavier. But when she told me about her infertility problems, I started working for her, and we started teaching at a cancer class. And there was a young lady that actually was in there in the cancer class waiting. She showed up early. She had her little baby with her. She had her in a stroller. And Catherine's really good with faces. And she said, "You look familiar to me. Where have I seen you before?" And the young lady said, "I actually had attended your diabetes class 2 years ago because my mom had diabetes. And I heard about your class. So I wanted to bring her so we can learn more about diabetes. And I had heard your story about how you were infertile. You had all these problems in terms of trying to get pregnant." She said, "My husband and I had been trying for over 20 years to try to have children.
Wow.
They've tried everything from infertility treatments to,
Very expensive,
freezing their
in vitro.
eggs, in vitro, all these different types of procedures, thousands upon thousands of dollars. She came to one class, heard her story, went home, and just changed her diet. And she said, and here is my 18-month-old child."
Wow.
I was so taken back. I got chills right now just telling the story because it was just so amazing on how true that the foods that we eat can impact not just our health in terms of heart disease, diabetes, but even fertility problems. And I could tell a couple more, but that might take a minute.
Yeah, we have lots of testimonials.
Yeah.
It really matters.
It does matter.
Yeah.
On a secondary note, I mean, it also makes an impact, and I'm sure we're going to get to it in a little bit, but you know what? I mean, when you think about how foods impact even prostate cancer and prostate issues, that can also impact your ability to, your fertility as well. I mean, it's just, if you aren't able to perform, it's because it's really a lot of the foods that we eat. So we can elaborate on that, of course, here in a little bit, but it's going to be a huge factor in what we do consume.
Can I point out something that I think is interesting that we're talking about today? I think there's a great irony when we look at reproductive disease. sorry, when we look at reproductive disease, it's really, these are our reproductive organs that we need to reproduce and continue population growth. And the foods that seem to be the most damaging come from the reproductive organs of another species, right? I don't think that's a coincidence that there's a strong correlation with ovarian, endometrial, breast cancer, and prostate cancer. There's such a strong correlation between those and dairy products like milks and cheeses. So I just think it's interesting from a high level perspective that reproductive excretions, I don't know what to call them, reproductive things from another species, when we ingest them, that's what it results in for us, is reproductive problems. So I wonder if it's that our bodies are confused on what to do with all of that. But I just think it's interesting thing to note.
Okay. Can I ask you a question on that right away?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people enjoy that particular aspect of every animal. In fact, people struggle for them because they look sweeter. Are you suggesting they should be more carefully treated, or we should avoid taking them?
Do you mean completely avoid dairy?
No, not dairy. Those reproductive parts of those dairy, do we avoid them, or do we need special treatment for them? Because you have identified that most of our problems in that sector too seem to be coming from those particular secretions from the dairy.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you suggest?
Do you mean in place of those?
Mr. Alex, are you trying to ask about eating chicken breast or?
Yes, those particular secretions from those reproductive sections of those dairy. Should we avoid them?
Well, if you're saying avoid any dairy products of any kind, the recommendation would be yes, because if you, as Katie mentioned earlier, these animals that are producing milk, like let's say for a cow, for example, they're taking a baby calf to grow it to 1,000-pound animal, and it has to have a high amount of hormones in order to do that, in order to growth hormones. And so when we increase our intake of those hormones, as she mentioned, is that it's increasing your estrogen, it's increasing other hormones, and that doesn't account for even the hormones that the farmers are giving them to continue to produce. So it's just one of those things to where our bodies aren't really designed to take these hormones from other animals. We're the only species on the planet that consumes dairy from another species, not like our own. So that is, and it's all designed in terms of, marketing milk does the body good, all those kind of things. We need to get calcium from these types of things. But the research actually indicates that we get enormous amounts of calcium just from our plant foods. So if you're concerned about your calcium intake, there's a number of plant sourced foods that you can get plenty of calcium from, and it's easier for your body to synthesize. Most of the calcium that you intake from from the refrigerator, from a pasteurized cow's milk, it's actually more harmful than it is beneficial. So
let me ask, what are the nutrients you get from plant food, and how do these nutrients assist in the reproductive health? And if you don't mind, you also let us know which are the plant food that are rich in these nutrients.
Okay. So plant foods with the most powerful nutrients for reproductive health would be, first we want to look at fiber. So that's in all plant foods. Mm-hmm. But so our superstars there would be beans and legumes. So like split peas, lentils, things like that, along with beans. So that would be number one. And then second would be cruciferous vegetables. So these are dark leafy greens usually. So kale, cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, bok choy. I'm missing a lot of them. Mustard greens, collard greens, Swiss chard, things like that. These are going to be rich in antioxidants, which actually protect the sperm cells and the outer area, to keep them strong and healthy, and then also protect women's reproductive organs. And then there's another group, and that is yellow vegetables. There's a great study in the International Journal of Cancer that looked at yellow vegetables, and that they extend the life of people with reproductive disease. They seem to overcome it more quickly and live longer, have lower rates of cancer. So what I'm talking about with yellow vegetables, that's a lot of our squashes. So yellow squash, acorn squash, spaghetti squash. I would put yellow bell peppers, things like that. So overarching, focusing on fiber, and then those dark leafy greens, the cruciferous vegetables. Those actually have a nutrient that is, they've shown to arrest the growth and reproduction of diseased cells. So that's huge. And then yellow squashes specifically. Also, there's one more that's important and controversial.
This is my favorite one.
That is soy. Soy is actually very protective for our reproductive organs, for men and women. It increases volume of sperm for men, and it has a direct connection to a lower risk of breast, ovarian, and uterine cancers in women. And I want to give you a little number with it. So this is from the American Journal of Epidemiology, a huge study, 100,000 women. So a really, really big one. They found that women who are consuming just 3 milligrams of soy, it's the isoflavones in soy, which seem to protect our reproductive system. So 3 milligrams a day, which is a very less than, I mean, it's probably half a serving. It's not very much of like tofu, edamame, tempeh, something like that, more whole or less processed. So 3 milligrams a day increase their fertility by 44%. So it's huge, huge, wildly protective against those cancers too. So we talk about those with prostate cancer. Soy is beneficial. And soy is a phytoestrogen. So it attaches to our cells and prevents these big estrogens that we're talking about. It prevents those from attaching to our cells. So that's how it's protective for us. It doesn't let them attach and change our DNA or anything like that. So those 4 groups, I would say.
Wow. I see Dr. Kina has been so quiet, so I'm going to bring her out from her quietness and let her ask a follow-up question before I ask the question I want to ask.
You know, it is always good to bring on some other experts, you know, to gain a little more knowledge. Sometimes you think you're in a specific area, that you're an expert, you know more, you know everything. But this is amazing. For the last several weeks, we've been talking about food. As a matter of fact, each time we've had a show, at the end of the day, it boils down to what we eat, what we drink, what we didn't eat, how we eat it, matters about our well-being, both reproductive health, and we've talked severally about cancer and things that causes cancer. So I wanted to ask about estrogen, breast cancer. And I know when you guys came to the house, you were telling us about how chicken was even worse than beef. Is this in connection to the estrogen you just talked about?
Yes, it is. Since chicken is such a high source of estrogen, that would give us higher risk. There are other issues with beef, depending on how it's grown, where someone lives. The cows are given like bovine growth hormone, which is a hormone which can affect our breast cancer risk, and they have insulin-like growth factor in the meat. So anytime someone's going to have meat, I think it's really important to look at where the meat's coming from, how it was raised. If they're chickens on a farm and they're not given any hormones or anything like that, they're obviously going to be smaller. But if they're, then that would be a safer option than one that's grown in the majority of chicken here in these factory farm situations and the same thing with beef, where they have to grow very big and fat in a very short period of time. They're given these hormones. Still not my favorite choice for someone to eat those for health reasons, but they will be healthier options if they're truly kind of pasture or farm raised, not given hormones, things like that.
True free range, grass fed, not caged of any kind, allowed to actually eat off the land like they're supposed to, right?
Well, Mr. Alex, maybe we should just go back to the farm and just eat directly from the farm, because I remember growing up, we used to catch fish live from the river and just we reared poultry, from the backyard of the houses, and so there was nothing like all these hormones. So maybe we should. Right. Or what do you think, Mr. Alex?
Well, like Tina said, we are, zeroing into the critical role of food in both health, and today we're talking of the same food now playing a critical and major role in reproductive health. So it's something that we really need to give a little more attention. I don't think people are giving it attention. I don't even think people understand what is going on in there. You earlier asked, you mean I won't eat what I want to eat? I think we are in a stage where it is no longer what you want to eat, but what is going to be good for you. So it's really exciting. And how do we get this information over to people? That's the challenge that is facing us, because it's really amazing what is going on.
Yeah, I think people would be shocked if they knew how their food was grown now. It's very different than the way it used to be that Emmanuel describes. And I think that anytime we get involved, we interject ourselves in Mother Nature, we start changing things, and then that has negative effects in general.
Well, it is not surprising that, there are more women, more infertility, more fibroids, more cysts. There's got to be something, a common denominator that is causing all these issues. In the clinic, I was just telling someone the other day, 5 years ago that I started practicing, and now just about every person that gets a lab draw is already pre-diabetic. And I'm not kidding you. It doesn't even matter. 6 years old, 7 years old, 15 years old, everybody in their 20s, their labs, they're having fatty liver, elevated liver enzymes already, pre-diabetes, high cholesterol. The other day I had an 8-year-old was referred from school. His blood pressure was already up. So I'm expecting that, he will have fatty liver because his liver enzyme is elevated. His cholesterol is elevated. He is 8 years old with a blood pressure of 130 something over 89. So I think there's got to be something, that is creating all these multiple issues, for our health. So this is a very interesting topic that we're diving into today.
Can I add something there, Kina?
Yes.
I think because this is a common thing with a lot of the diseases that you mentioned, and it is probably the number one risk factor for infertility and reproductive disease is body fat, excess body fat, and high BMI. When it comes to infertility and reproductive disease, my first recommendation to anyone, obviously, I want them to look at diet, but the first priority needs to be getting our BMI down to a healthy range, because, and we're talking about estrogen, right? So that excess body fat, like, it's creating problems in the liver, problems with blood sugar, blood pressure, like you mentioned, but it does the same thing for fertility as well. These fat cells in the body are like, they're just busy hormone factories, and they're churning out like our ovaries and our adrenal glands in men and women are just churning out these excess hormones because we have this excess fat. And I think a key takeaway, the Harvard Nurses study, which was massive, they looked at fertility, and the women with the best fertility, and they tracked them for all over 40 years, a long time. The women with the highest fertility outcomes and the least reproductive disease were considered normal to slightly thin. So BMI seems to really matter, and it's a direct correlation or an indirect correlation. The higher the BMI, the lower the fertility, and it continued to be this steady thing. And so I want to point out, technically, when I was so I'm 5'9", and when I got sick, I was 183 pounds. So technically I was obese. I think most people would say like, oh, she kind of looks normal nowadays because that's become part of our culture. But through that process of changing my diet, I lost 55 pounds. And that is important to note that is also what helped with my reproductive disease, because I wasn't churning out all these excess estrogens. And so the patients that we see with PCOS and all these introductory kind of symptoms that will lead to problems later are typically obese. A person who is obese, male or female, is 3 times more likely to be infertile. And so that means that it's leading up to all those things that create infertility, like endo and cysts and just poor sperm motility and things like that. So BMI matters, and it's interesting that it's connected to all of the things that you mentioned. The last thing I want to mention is that in order to have a baby, we have a sex hormone binding globulin. And body fat will reduce the amount of that we produce. And we think that's kind of a biological sort of preservation of the species, right? If someone is obese, like our body thinks, okay, not healthy for them to carry a baby right now. So it's sort of a biological protectiveness thing. But this protein molecule, it actually, what happens, it makes our sex organs inactive, our sex hormones. And so that's another issue with body fat and what it creates in a reproductive sense.
Wow.
Yeah, we've been talking about how to enhance our reproductive desires. So what is nitric acid, and what role does it play in what we're talking about?
Nitric oxide is so important. Do you want to talk about it?
So it's actually it's a molecule that makes the muscle lining of our arteries stretch. So we have these things on the inside of our cells. It's a lining. They're called endothelial cells, and they're little narrow cells, and they're like it's what helps our arteries stretch. If we need more blood flow, it helps the arteries stretch and expand and what we call dilate the blood vessel. So nitric oxide, as we're young men and young women, young men produce enormous amounts of nitric oxide. So our reproductive organs function often and regularly.
Good blood flow.
Good blood flow is happening. But as we achieve and get into our 30s, nitric oxide production actually drops. The production decreases significantly. So that means that our circulation's not getting to our reproductive organs as effectively, and it's impacting our ability to perform. So what we want to do is we want to actually increase our nitric oxide production naturally. And so there are actually foods, because that's the good news, there are foods that helps us increase our nitric oxide production. It's good for heart health, obviously. So we want to make sure that we're doing so. If we're dealing with high blood pressure, stuff like that, you want to eat foods that are rich in nitric oxide, because our bodies will convert it so it can be used effectively. So what has rich nitric oxide or nitrates? Green leafy vegetables, so your kale, your bok choy, your mustard greens, broccoli, stuff like Swiss chard. So the theme is the same: dark leafy greens, always. But here's the best one: it's beets. I know the earthy ones that taste like really earthy. Beets are the richest source of nitric oxide that we can eat. Natural beets, and something that's even more important: if you eat beets, don't cut the leaves off. You want to eat those. They actually have more nitric oxide than the beet itself. So from what some studies show. So it's very, very beneficial. And then berries, blackberries, strawberries, blueberries, things like that. So you want to reach high rich in blueberries, another berry. So one large plate of leafy greens or berries will give you more nitric oxide than your body actually produces in one day. So guess what? I eat a lot of it.
That's good. I was gonna say,
I eat a lot.
When Matt learned that, I remember the day, because ever since then he's like, I have to have a big plate of.
I need berries. I've even got nitric oxide supplements. I've got it everywhere. So,
Wow.
There's another one that I think is important to women, especially. Chocolate.
Oh, yeah, that's another good one.
Chocolate benefits.
That's why women love chocolate.
I try to have chocolate every day now.
So, but it's not every chocolate. Can you?
No.
Dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate.
Yeah, as dark as you can handle. Not all the sugar and dairy mixed in, so not milk chocolate. But
obviously, I take it the nitric oxide because also the performance aspect of it. When people are looking at for just normal cardiovascular health, in order to have good blood flow, your arteries have to be able to dilate. But here's the thing that we're not talking about. Diets high in fat actually restrict the production or your body's ability to use nitric oxide. So when you're consuming high fat diets, high meats and high in fat, your body won't actually be able to use it. And it's actually going to it's called fatty blood. It's actually going to slow your circulation down. So the research just shows that if you are looking at circulatory health, these high-fat diets and high uses of oils are slowing your body's ability to use nitric oxide, which is so important just for cardiovascular health, and not just to mention reproductive health as well.
Yeah.
Wow. So while you're on that topic, I wanted to see if you can tie together erectile dysfunction, which also causes a cause of the infertility. Could you tie that together with the nitric oxide and how it helps with erectile dysfunction?
It's all about dilation. Like if the blood flow can't get down there, then it's not going to work. So basically, it was a beautiful class yesterday Catherine taught. It was a heart disease class. The number one sign for men for cardiac problems is erectile dysfunction. It's the dark horse in the room. Nobody wants to talk about it, and it's because it's embarrassing. And I can speak from in my own home from experience in terms of my son and his friends, and of course I noticed a difference when I was about 8 years ago. Some different symptoms I was dealing with. And so that is the first indication of heart disease because your body has to prioritize where blood flow is going. And so the reproductive organs, sadly, gentlemen, it's going to be the first thing to go because that is not a vital organ that's keeping you alive.
Well, and it's really hard to have a.
Could you please repeat that statement?
It's also really hard to have a baby
when you can't get it up. So the gist of it is there are things we men are consuming that are increasing our risk for erectile dysfunction, which Katie could tell you the men who suffer from.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the statistics. So 1 out of every 4 men, 25% of men diagnosed with erectile dysfunction will have a fatal heart attack within 2 years. So it is a cardiovascular disease. Yeah. It's a circulation problem. And the same foods that promote health of our reproductive system are the same ones that give us nitric oxide and help us get blood to all parts of our bodies.
Right.
And the same foods that create inflammation and problems with the reproductive system also are the ones who stop our nitric oxide production. Animal proteins and very fatty foods like cheese and things like that. But then also sugar has an effect on nitric oxide production. So I would say that's somewhat connected to reproductive health as far as milk sugar, but straight processed sugars will create inflammation and then contribute to ED as well. So that's where you could think of like beer and alcohol and just desserts. research shows that just one animal food meal a day reduces blood flow. And so that's powerful. If we tie that in with, if we're getting a lot of fat from it and then a lot of hormones from it, if there's dairy in there or chicken, then now we're affecting our reproductive system. But ED is just, it's just blood flow. It's just blood flow and inflammation, and those are important for a woman's reproductive health as well. I want to add one more thing. You know what I want to add?
And I was going to say, if you're not going to add it, I want to add something. So go ahead.
We debated on how to talk about this and what was appropriate. So there's a really common symptom I've heard of postmenopausal women as far as reproductive health, and where nitric oxide matters, not just for blood flow, but they can have dryness, which I guess is a really, really big issue. It's the number one complained about issue with postmenopausal women. And so the foods that we talk about, specifically soy, increases
lubrication.
Yeah. So that's also, it's very hard to have, if the woman has dryness and the man has ED, then you're kind of dead in the water. So
that's double problem.
Double tragedy, not a problem.
Right. So soy and dark leafy greens increase lubrication, and so that makes it more fun and enjoyable for everybody, and so then more activity is taking place.
Yeah, and the one thing I was going to add is the statistic behind just one meal of some sort of high fatty food like a steak or chicken, that actually can inhibit your blood flow for up to 6 to 8 hours. So if you think about if I want to get busy,
Then he has a salad.
Then I have a salad.
Okay, I take note of that.
Yeah,
because it's true. Like there was research done and actually shows just how much fat is in the blood just by one meal. Within hours, within 2 hours, the blood that was drawn from gentlemen was completely cloudy of fat and saturated fats and everything like that. So it does make a difference when it comes to male performance. So let's think about my diet today. If I'm a normal meat eater, if I eat chicken for lunch, that's 6 to 8 hours of lack of blood flow or slower blood flow. But then I have it for dinner, like a steak or something like that. And I have very little vegetables or fiber in that whole day. Well, then now all of a sudden my blood flow is going to be very sludgy. And if you've ever eaten meat, then all of a sudden you felt like you could take a really good nap.
That's because you can't make enough
nitric oxide, which is our energy, which helps get our energy to the cells and to our body, especially our brain. Think about it. If we have fatty blood and we have slow blood flow to our brain, we're going to be tired. That's just a lack of oxygen. Really, that's what tiredness comes from, is a lot of lack of oxygen and energy. And when we have fatty blood, we can't get that. So it's really, really important to understand just how powerful meat can actually inhibit our desire and performance, but also just our overall health.
Come to think about it, as you are talking now, I'm just adding it together. Like, okay, if you are a man and you go get busy in the evening, maybe to seek a love offering, and so you've eaten enough of like all this African food, strong food, coupled with beef, chicken. Then at night again for your dinner, you ate so heavy. So by the time it is time for you to perform,
you're tired.
Then you now begin to pray against the devil, and you don't know that you are the devil that have actually acted all day long.
I have a gift for you, Emmanuel. Visual proof. So there's a documentary we reference in our intercourses class. It's called Game Changers. And if y'all just fast forward to the 51-minute and 54-second mark, they actually measure 3 men, and they give one a plant-based dinner, no animal foods, no extra fat. Another one has like a chicken dinner, and the other one has steak. And then they measure like circumference throughout the night while they're sleeping, and like frequency. And so I want to give you some numbers. The man, and then they do it where everybody has plant foods the second night. So it's a fair comparison. And they find that the nights that they eat plant foods, there was over a 300% increase in the number of erections overnight that occurred.
Wow.
Yeah. And a fun fact, Matt likes this one, a 13% increase in the size. So
Okay.
that's at the 51-minute mark of Game Changers.
It'll change your life. I'm just saying.
This is interesting.
Oxide and plant foods before getting.
Emmanuel's taking notes. He's like,
I'm look at my pen.
You are talking about SUE. Can you spell that SUE for us so that people can really know what it is?
Oh, it's called Game Changers. It's all one word. It's a documentary on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's a food. There was a food you are calling SUE.
No, soy.
The what?
Are you talking about soy?
Okay, soy.
Can you explain to people a little more how to get soy?
Yes, and the spelling. Let us also have the spelling.
SOY.
And, okay, so the soy-rich foods. The first one would be whole soy. So that's edamame. EDAMAME. Those are the little green soybeans.
Like pea, they look like peas in a pod.
Yeah,
but
a lot
bigger.
of people just eat them boiled and then
you get them
salted.
in most Asian restaurants.
So that's our whole form. Another is tofu, TOFU. So this is it's minimally processed. It's basically blended soybeans, and that's a good substitute for like eggs, and if you're doing custards and desserts and things like that. And then another whole soy option would be tempeh, TEMPEH. It's sold in planks and has a really unique texture that can mimic meat, especially like ground meat and things like that, ground chicken. When it's crumbled. So those three, but even soy milk, if it's
I was going to ask you, how about soy milk? Can people get soy milk?
Yeah, so you want to, this is where you want to be a label reader. Make sure that your soy milk is made from whole soybeans and not soy powder. And so I just kind of put those in order of priority. From whole, but there's still benefits in soy milk. And soy is rich, they're called isoflavones. And that is what is so beneficial for heart health and for reproductive organs, all of them.
Wow. I don't really believe that it's we've spent 52 minutes. Maybe we just rewind the time again, but I believe this is so resourceful. I know we've kind of talked about this, but I don't remember if we were specific that can food play a role in the absence of ovulation in a woman or the inability of the ovaries to produce eggs? And let me just combine it with the second one. I know, is there a possible link between the food a woman eats and the irregular menstrual cycle?
Yeah.
So those two.
Yeah.
That's a big question.
That's a good one.
So I'm going to hit the first one really quick since we're short on time, because that second one needs more time. So ovulation, quality of eggs, yes, it can affect it, but it's not where you think. A woman's eggs are made when she is in utero. So my eggs were made when I was in my mother's belly, when my mother was pregnant. So the quality of my eggs is based off of my mother's diet. So that's very important for anyone who wants to have a child to really consider their diet.
Sorry, Catherine. So can you repeat that? The quality of your egg?
It was dependent on my mother's diet while she was pregnant.
Wow.
All of a woman is born with all of her eggs. A baby girl has every egg she will ever produce. So it's all done in utero. So a pregnant woman's diet is very important. This is why I want to point out an interesting link. A lot of women who experience morning sickness, it's because they're eating dairy and their body is saying no. Their body is rejecting the dairy. So like I didn't have morning sickness or any kind of sickness because I didn't consume dairy. So I think that's another protective measure. Let's go on to menstrual cycle. Now that's huge. Dramatic effects and a very short turnaround time, which I think is interesting too, because I love talking about PMS and cycles because that's something you see an effect on almost immediately. And so what we've done, we've kind of normalized PMS and menstrual symptoms in our cultures. Yeah, we've said it's normal for a woman to be a little crazy. A little weepy, maybe short tempered,
or hyper-tempered,
cramps and back pain and acne. None of this is normal. It's just common. And it's because of our diet. And so as I mentioned, when I weighed my dietary transition, I got rid of my reproductive stuff, but also my PMS went away completely. I went from very heavy cycles, emotional, crying, tons of acne, to no symptoms at all within months of changing my diet. But I want to give you some study numbers. There's a big study at Georgetown that looked at this. They found women who transitioned to a plant-based diet 1 week before their cycle. That's 7 days. They cut their water retention in half. So now we're not looking at bloating, sluggishness, tight-fitting clothes, which makes women mad, right?
It's good psychological.
The mood swings were cut by 50%. They actually had less weight gain during that week.
Because you're not emotionally eating.
Right. And their cholesterol improved, which improved their immune system as well. And what I found working with patients with really bad PMS, if they don't want to make permanent changes to their diet, the most important time period is the 7 days before she starts. This will also help keep her have a regular cycle, because you mentioned irregular. That 7 days before she starts, low fat, no added oils or fats, no added butters, low animal products, high fiber to flush out all of that excess estrogen so that the lining of her uterus doesn't get really thick and create all of these problems. That's what creates PMS, a really thick lining of the uterus. So that week before she starts, hey, if this is a woman in your life will be different. If you feed her healthy food that week before, you'll notice a completely different woman on her cycle.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the second question.
She has answered the
Okay, you've already answered that, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I don't know what else to say. Okay, over to you, Dr. Kida.
Yeah.
We didn't mention
I'm done.
anything about
Okay.
oxidants, the role of oxidants in reproductive health.
And
What do you
also,
say, Mr. Alex?
You could talk about lycopene.
yeah, and
Oxidants.
also I wanted you to also define, a little bit PCOS, because most would I say Nigerian people do not know what PCOS is, so that's a new language here for us. So just for the interest of those who are watching from African countries.
PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. So tons and tons of cysts in the ovaries that are interfering with release of the eggs. And all it is a too much estrogen. And I want to point out a little thing you said that is not as common in Nigeria, and that is because typically that diet has fewer hormones than a typical American diet.
Higher in
and
fiber.
So it's totally a reflection of a culture's dietary practices. And we're starting to see PCOS and infertility cases rise as different countries are westernizing their diet. They're getting these Western diseases with it. So it's a huge deal right now in the US. It's an epidemic, truly.
Yeah, and there's other countries that are having the same problem. Japan is one of the biggest. They had the most centennials. They're one of the most highly studied countries because they had people living so long, because they had a high vegetarian, high plant food diet. But once they started to adopt the standard American diet or Western diet, they started to see an increase in some of these health problems. So all of our diseases are following the types of foods. And so it's truly something to consider. And when we get back to our original way we should eat, which is the high amounts of plant foods, we will see a decrease in our disease in terms of what we face in this country and around the world.
Wow, wow. Well,
Wow.
it's been 1 hour, and then one of my jobs here is I'm the timekeeper. So, but
Mr. Alex, are you okay?
Mr.
Yeah,
Alex
I'm
is
okay.
not.
I'm okay. I'm
Mr.
okay.
Alex is not okay.
He looks upset.
It's just digesting everything that has
He
been.
looks so
He looks like,
disappointed.
darn it. Oh.
This is really, really very, very resourceful, very, very resourceful. And on behalf of the whole team of a Kenight Show, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, for this value that you bring into the community. It's not just about us; it's the entire community, and it will shock you, people that watch this show from right from Jamaica to London to Africa. People comment. I believe Dr. Kina will say more about that. But we just want to say thank you so much. This is really, really resourceful. So we normally do this, like as we round off today, I will call it the take home. I know we've said a lot, but if you have to just compress everything that has been discussed today, just in 1 minute, what will you say that take home would be for our audience today?
I'll do women, you do men.
Sure.
So women, fiber, more fiber, try to eat lower fat, and keep an eye on those estrogen-rich foods, like reducing dairy, eliminating it if you can, and reducing chicken intake. If you're going to eat meat, try to eat it as close to its original form and concept on a farm as you possibly can. And then increase green leafy vegetables and squashes for sure.
And for men, I would say it's okay not to eat meat. Just kidding. But it's true. It changed my whole life. I've lost 85 pounds going on a more heavy plant-based diet. But just take the opportunity to do that. As Katie said, dairy is a strong correlation, and more grass-fed, anything to its natural source. So yes, you're going to spend a little bit more, but it's higher quality. You're not going to have the hormones. So go higher quality meats, grass-fed, but make smaller portions. You don't need to have this big, massive steak, but increase your vegetable intake, especially something called tomatoes, cooked tomatoes specifically for you gentlemen, because there's been some studies that show that just eating nutrient-rich lycopene is going to help reduce your risk of prostate cancer and other health-related problems. But just eat more vegetables, and I think that you'll find that you will see a much better performance and a lot more beets. Beets. Just
Wow.
beat it.
This is so awesome. Well, it's been a nice time hanging out with you guys, and my name is Emmanuel Adigbola. So, Mr. Alex, what's your take home today before Dr. Kina wrap it up?
I don't think there is anything more to say. Eat
Well,
vegetable and fruits and avoid meat. So that's the take.
And dairy. Even that ice cream.
Oh my God, this is very interesting. Over to you, Dr. Kina.
Yeah, it has been another wonderful and interesting topic today. I'm sure we could go on and on and on, and I'm sure that we would invite them again to continue this conversation. But at the meantime, if you're having issues with fertility, please look to yourself first. Change your diet for sure. Change your partner's diet. We've seen from today's topic that diet. We've been talking about diet for a very long time. Every disease that we've talked about is all related to diet. Exercising, make sure that you have your weight. I had a patient the other day that came in and they told her she couldn't have a baby, and she started exercising, lost 70 pounds, boom, she got pregnant. So these are some of the things that we need to look at. Cut out sugar in your life. You don't need sugar. And what else can I say? Thank you all for being here with us today. I want to thank Matt and Catherine for everything you've been contributing to the community. And we look forward to having you again on another topic, because it is endless. The world needs this information, and somebody's got to get it out there. Thank you all for watching us today, and we'll see you at the next show.